to try and solve for some of that in part, we developed our in-house training, which is all about just helping people to use Workplace, understand what different resources and groups are available, think about how they can sort of tailor things like their notifications to make sure that they're only getting information that's relevant to them and not sort of all in sundry. And yeah, we developed that into a really quick like online thing that was delivered by our brilliant Workplace engagement officer, Daniel. So people could kind of ask questions and do a bit of a Q&A in smaller groups. And that's been really, really successful. And we also recruited champions. So in every local service, we wanted to kind of make contact with people who were either using Workplace really well, or we knew had a particular passion for engaging with their staff and volunteers, so that it wasn't just us saying, please come and use Workplace for these reasons. It was actually people on the ground in their local services able to say, hey, such and such, I know you've been really struggling with this. Have you had a look at this Workplace group where other advisors are talking about debt advice, for example? So we wanted to be able to do a bit more of that word of mouth. And again, this was something we were worried would suffer a bit from lack of engagement due to overwhelm, stress, difficulty with running services in a different way very quickly. But actually the appetite for people doing both the training and signing up to be champions has been massive. And I think that's because the current environment has really forced people who might not have been that keen before on kind of moving to online collaboration to understand the value of it, especially in a time where people aren't able to be in person with each other. Next slide, please, Dawn. So just to have a quick overview of like what some of that training and champions material looked like. It was basically like making very clear to people what the purpose of that was and kind of what we could support people with. And as I said, a lot of that training was based off of feedback from people saying, actually, I don't really understand how to do this, or this feels really complicated, or this feels quite challenging to me. So it was really tailored around kind of user feedback. And that would be like a really big piece of advice from me, is with any sort of engagement strategy, particularly when it's dealing with people remotely or online, is to just tailor your strategies to your people. It sounds so obvious, but quite often just taking like a tool, so saying like, oh, we want to start using Zoom. Okay, has anyone seen like a good video on using Zoom and the functionality? That might be a bit helpful to people to understand the sort of basics. But actually what we really needed to help people understand was why we were using Workplace as citizens' advice and what we thought the value was to the organisation and the sorts of work that we were trying to do. So there are some universal truths, but basically one size doesn't fit all with these sorts of things. I've found that very much the case with like digital tools. Is it's all about tailoring the use, training, onboarding, all of those sorts of things to the people who are actually using it in your organisation. And I won't go through all of these, but you can see like some of the feedback that we've had and the progress there that we've made in sort of like growing those numbers of people who are engaging with using that space and those tools. Moving on to events on the next slide. So obviously we had to move our events online and just make them work very quickly in a different way to how we'd ever done them before. We'd started before the pandemic live streaming some of our events so that people who weren't able to join in person could join remotely. So it wasn't starting completely from scratch, but the majority of our engagement around events was done in person.